Welcome to the Spark Good podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration, strategies, and stories that will ignite your passion for making a difference through your business. I'm your host, Stephanie Malon-Rufi, and together we will dive into the world of entrepreneurship and small business and explore how we can harness its power to spark good and change how we do business. I believe in the incredible potential that business can have in making a positive social impact, and I want to help you discover how you can better align your business goals with meaningful causes and contribute to a better world. Plus, you'll learn how to nurture your own well-being, change traditional rules that might be holding you back, and thrive in your role as a social business owner. All right, let's dive in. Hello, and thank you for coming back and joining me again here on the Spark Good podcast. And if you're new, well, thanks for listening and trying me out here. My name is Stephanie Malon-Rufi, and I am your host. And today I am really excited to be able to share this content with you. This is something that I actually created a couple of years ago. It's called the 5C's to successfully build a social change business. And I created this as a way to talk about some of the ways that I work with my clients. It also gives you some ideas of maybe some of the more common pitfalls that business owners have, especially when they have a social impact piece. And I've gotten great feedback that it's actually a really helpful framework for people just to think about how they're going about building their business, especially when it's one that's creating positive social change. So I'm going to walk you through today these 5 C's. So first of all, I'll give them to you, I guess I should say. We have competition, we have Cha-Ching, we have community, change, and the 5th one is care. And I'm going to go through each of these on today's episode. So let's start with the first one, which is competition. And I know you're thinking, oh, competition, it sounds more cutthroat. And isn't that counterintuitive to trying to do something that's community oriented or that's creating positive social impact? And do those really go together? And, I'm going to tell you that they do go together. And we don't have to think also of competition as being cutthroat and a bad thing. Competition can be positive because it can also help people to strive to be better. But when you have a competitor, you're able to also say like where you're similar and where you're different. And that helps to define the way that you're unique. So competition, I think, is actually great. And it's really important that social business owners realize the competition, accept that it's there, and don't make these 2 mistakes. So these are 2 mistakes that I often see. So one of them is, and I will say this is pretty much most entrepreneurs, whether you have a social impact piece and that's important to you or not, this is a very common thing that can happen is where, especially when you're the founder, the innovator, the creator, the inventor, is you're so in love with what you've created and thinking, how could people not want this? There's nothing like it in the world, right? You see the uniqueness and how special and amazing what you've created is. And how are others not seeing this and jumping on it? And on the one hand, this is great, right? It's great to be so passionate about something that you feel like it's such a no-brainer. Of course, people want this. However, you have to take a step back. And this is, again, where it can be really helpful to work with someone external of your business, such as a coach, or a mentor, and someone who can give you some outside perspective, okay? Because you need to take a step back and just put yourself in the shoes of somebody who knows nothing about your business, who's brand new and is still learning about what it is you offer or what this amazing, offer or product or services that you've created. And you need to be able to remember that perspective, because if you can remember that perspective, it's going to make your marketing efforts more successful, your sales process much more successful. So this is really important to recognize that there is competition. It's not a bad thing. And you have to remember that it's there no matter how amazing your product is or your service. Because remember, the other thing is, just because something like it doesn't exist doesn't mean there aren't substitutes. There's something else somebody could get instead, or somebody could do nothing, right? That is competition. Somebody choosing not to take action is something that you're competing with. So just really important to keep that in mind. The second mistake I see in this category is being overly reliant on your impact piece, your environmental or your social mission, so much so that the quality of what it is you're putting out there you might not be as concerned with that, feeling that, oh, this mission piece is it's going to ride with, people are not ride with it, or people are going to allow maybe the quality not to be as good because they're going to be really into the social impact piece. An example of this might be perhaps if a bakery, a lot of your workforce in the bakery is with populations that typically have a lot of barriers to employment. So you're providing employment opportunity and job skills training at the bakery. And, sometimes things get burnt, or it isn't quite made the right way. And, that might happen once, and things happen, right? But if you're repeatedly, the quality is just not there, and you're priced for a better quality product, even if this employment model is really exciting to a lot of your customers, eventually they're probably going to want better quality baked good items. So that's just an example, really simplistic, but it's important to think about, right? You don't want to rely too heavily on that social mission, social impact piece. That's more kind of the icing on the cake of something that's already amazing in and of itself. Okay, we're going to move on to number 2, which is Cha-Ching. So who knows what that sound is? If you don't know, it's the sound of a cash register, especially old ones where they'd actually pull a lever and open a drawer and there was physical cash in there. And the machine, the cash register would make a cha-ching sound. So I know this might be completely an obsolete item, not the too distant future, but I chose it because cha-ching symbolizes money. And that's what we're really talking about here, is the money piece. Like, why is this on my list? It seems obvious, right? We all need money, but there's a little bit more depth to this topic, and there's different ways that this can show up. So it's not just about making money, right? It's also about understanding your finances, knowing your numbers. All business owners need to know what it takes to operate their business financially. Even if you have a bookkeeper and or a finance person, you are the owner, you are the CEO, and you still need to know and understand them. So I ask you right now, do you know your numbers? Do you know your income? Do you know your expenses? And your pricing? Are you paying yourself? Are you paying yourself enough? So really important when it comes to the money to get really comfortable with all those terms and those numbers. The other term that's important is profit. Now, people have mixed feelings about profit because, in America, corporate America, profit is king. And then we also have the nonprofit world where profit is not existent. And the nonprofit world is typically where you have social and environmental impact, where you're caring for your community. So therefore we have kind of a disconnect from profit. On the one hand, it's too much, right? There's a lot of really negative things and consequences from pushing for too much profit. And on the other hand, we have none. And so it's not always the most comfortable word for people. However, we need to reframe how we look at profit. And this is really important for entrepreneurs, social impact entrepreneurs, everyone. And understanding that profit is a key to sustainability and that you do want to have some profit, and there are ways to build that in. One of the books I highly recommend on this topic is Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Might be something you've heard of before, but I might do a future episode on that. It's a system for making sure you create some profit in your business, and it's a really powerful model for how you're processing your income and your expenses. So back to my list. When we're in the Cha-Ching category and we're talking about money, we need to get comfortable with profit and reframe our relationship with it. Also in the money category is pricing. And, pricing, it's a science, it's also an art. And you want to make sure that your price covers expenses, but there's more to that. And that's where value really comes into play. There's also a phrase that says it's not your job to decide if your client or customer can afford you. And while that's true, oftentimes when we are working in social change, the topic of social justice and equity is really important. And determining how to consider economic justice while also building a sustainable business can be hard. And so this is a bigger topic. I feel like all of these lead to some bigger topics that I'm really excited to get more into in future episodes of this podcast. But it's really important to consider the different pieces of the pricing puzzle, because it's not maybe as black and white as what we first thought about. And there really are a lot of creative alternative solutions that are out there. So again, something I want to get into the future, but a really important piece under money. Another piece when you're talking about money is the funding. Okay, there's some businesses that require a lot of upfront capital. There's a lot of upfront expenses. And this can often be because, like, when you have a product, you have to pay in advance for the product being made before you're selling it. Okay, so some things, when you have a brick and mortar store, oftentimes you have to do what's called a build out. You need to modify the space to suit your business needs. A lot of upfront money. So therefore, getting external funding becomes a lot quicker of a need, right? That's top of the list when you're starting out or when you're kind of in early stage. And so there's traditional loans, there's grants, there's crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, which has become more popular in recent years. So there's a lot to consider. Again, when you're talking about money, when you're talking about funding, and when you're trying to get something off the ground, even if it's just your inexistent business, but you have a new product launch that you want to do, there can often be a lot of upfront capital that goes into that. So important, again, under the money piece, is to really get to understand funding better, especially if that's something that you need to use. And lastly, I will end with this one, is money mindset. And this really is about your relationship with money, because that relationship can influence your business decisions. And when I talk about money mindset, I'm not necessarily talking about charge what you're worth, raise your prices. It's very common, especially in the women entrepreneurial communities, to talk about we need to earn what we're worth and raise our prices. And that often is because women tend to get paid less and value themselves less, and other companies value women less. And so I'm all for that, and that's totally important. However, it's not, we also don't want to get our worth tied up in money that closely. That can actually be dangerous. And it's really about recognizing your relationship with money, and that's a big piece of your money mindset. So again, yes, you want to make sure your prices align with your expertise and the value that you're bringing, but we want to separate ourselves from finding our own worth in the money. We don't want to devalue ourselves because we don't have as much money as we want. We want to instead work on that relationship we have with money. So full disclosure, this is something I am actively working on right now. So it's probably something I will be talking more about as we move along here in the podcast. All right. We're going to move on to the third C, which is community. And there's really three aspects of community that I am talking about here. So the first one is consider if your community supports your social mission. Do they understand and stand behind your cause? Often, social entrepreneurs do different things, and it's really crucial to have the support of the community. When I say different things, I mean they're a little bit outside the box, right? And might be operating in a different way, not in the maybe traditional business way. And so it's important to have the community, especially the community that you want to impact, is supportive of you. All right, the next community is your network. So you really want to make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who support your goals, who connect. Like, are you connected to other social impact business owners? Because there's some unique challenges, of which we've even talked about on this episode, that come with being the owner of a social impact business. Side note, this is an area that I am also going to be going more into with my own business, and I will have an offer that is more centered around bringing a group and a network together of social business owners. So if this is something that interests you, or you're looking to have a greater network, stay tuned in 2024. Okay, the third bucket here in community is think about the support and the experts that you need. So I'm not just talking about your network, who you network with, partners and collaborators that you have. That's really important. But also, you're going to hire some people. You might have professionals, hiring contracts, hiring team members. Who are the people that you're getting support from, as well as experts you're looking to for guidance? Do they understand your business model, and do they share your values? Super important. There's a entrepreneur, and I've kind of followed her journey. And one of the things, she was really a growing business, and she liked to kind of hire in chunks, or I don't know if that's quite the right word. She'd hire groups, like 3 to 4 people at a time, kind of. So it wasn't just 1 or 2 here. So even if there wasn't quite enough work, or they weren't maxed out, she was still bringing people in. It was like more efficient to group people together. Plus, she was not interested in maxing out her employees and team members, but she knew the work was coming, so she wanted to bring people in. And the person who was her CFO said, well, your current employees aren't maxed out enough to bring someone in. That was going to be a waste of some of her money. And can you guess what happens? The CFO was no longer working there. Because her value, right, as part of her business is to not burn people out, to have employee wellness in her business. So this was a strategic move in alignment with her values. So that's one of the reasons I love this example. Secondly, she had someone on her team and her support network, an expert, who was not aligned, right? So that's an example of how important it is. So who are you hiring? Who are you actually paying money to support you? Do you have alignment there? All right. Fourth C is change. One of my favorite quotes from Gandhi is, be the change you want to see in the world. And change can happen in different ways through your business. This is something I talk about a lot. So there's changing through your business, right? Using your products, through how you're pricing, even how you're sourcing on your supply chain, your employment practices. All of those matter. How you're doing business, how you employ can make a significant social impact, right? I mean, think of my last example with the CFO. So another change that can happen is changing industry standards, changing the way an industry works. That's really powerful, and that's where you're really being a disruptor. and challenging the status quo if it's not aligned with your values. You can advocate for change within your industry, and sometimes that advocacy even has to do with government regulation of an industry that you're in as well, right? So there's a lot of ways you could go with it depending on the situation or what you see is the change that needs to happen there. So this is this is really a big one. It's doing things differently because it's better for yourself, better for your employees, better for those you serve. An example I often give for this is actually with a social entrepreneur who I don't know, but I greatly admire. And her name is Tori Dunlap, and her company is First 100K. She has a book by that name. Her tagline is "Fighting the Patriarchy by Making You Rich." And she talks about the way that financial systems are rooted in patriarchy. There is so much guilt and shame that's put into our financial systems. And she calls out like financial gurus like Dave Ramsey and how their practices and the way they talk about money in the industry doesn't align with what she talks about as feminist finances. And one of the things, I have a little quote of hers that I appreciate, and I think that this really illustrates it, is saying, "It is my mission to fight the patriarchy through financial education. I have a responsibility to pass this information on. Without financial education, financial freedom can never be attained. And without financial freedom and economic equality, women will always lack true equality." So here you see these are like really strong values that is dictating the way that she is showing up, the way that she is running her business, and she's disrupting the industry. Okay, the last piece of change is changing systems through advocacy. So this is what I alluded to earlier, like within an industry, or it even could be what's the system attached to that industry, which can include government as well. But whatever the change you want to bring to the world from your business, it's tied to at least one larger systemic problem. So I encourage you to think about that. What's maybe the larger systemic problem? Could be more than one, but that the change I want to see is connected to. So I always think that's a great thing just to remind yourself of that, because it also helps you think about the bigger picture of, wow, this like I can really think big here and make some big change, and thinking about what those systems might be. Now, again, people often hear the word advocacy and they do shy away with it because they don't want to get political. But you need to know, right? What's the larger systemic problem that you're connected with? And you need to understand how you can have an impact both at the granular level of your business as well as the bigger systemic level. Okay, we've come up to our fifth and final C, and this is care. Now, this is actually deeply personal because it's about taking care of yourself while running your business. It is a reminder that your personal priorities should be integrated into your business, into your plan for your business, okay? Your own self-care, honoring your needs really are just as important as your business tactics. So don't forget to nurture yourself while you're changing the world. Now, when I work with clients, we focus both on the inner and the outer. And I have conversations that are around honoring your own needs and personal wellness. This is, especially when I work one-on-one with coaching with clients, this is definitely a piece of it. Because the outer being, right, those are all the things that we need to do in our business, but we also have inner work to do around our own mindset and our personal wellness and keeping us well and engaged and feeling really good. All right. Thank you for sticking with me to the end. There's a lot to say in all these categories. Just as a reminder, these 5 C's are competition, Cha-Ching, community, change, and care. And I thank you for listening today. I encourage you to maybe you had one new thought or one new spark of an idea of something you want to explore further, something you want to do. So I just encourage you to, what was that one thing? And write it down and maybe take some action on it. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today.